do hear that Joy Ogaji now has joined us from Abuja studio. She's the Secretary Association of Electricity Generation Companies, GENCOS. Joy, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a whole lot of issues going on around in the power sector. It's almost sound like a broken record. Nigeria cannot keep the lights on, and the blame game continues. The discourse have been described multiple times by several people as the weakest links. But as we do know, to be foolhardy to think that the discourse are responsible for where we are in Nigeria concerning power sector. But to what extent do you think we should blame the discourse? To what extent should the discourse accept responsibility for the erratic power supply we continue to witness in Nigeria?
Good morning, Nigerians, and thank you for having me this morning. Responding to that question, going by the privity of contracts, I have contract with the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, NBET. So I don't think I'm in a position to speak about the GENCOS, about the discourse, because we are co-operators in the market. If the discourse are not performing, then the relevant agencies should be held liable. Discourse signed a performance agreement, just as the GENCOS signed same as well. And the GENCOS have kept to the performance agreement by ramping up capacity, so even above and beyond what was required of them by the 5th year. So if the discourse on their part have not performed, as is being claimed and asserted, then the relevant agencies such as NEC, BP, the policymakers, the National Assembly should be held liable. And I don't think I'm in a position to give the whether pass or fail mark.
Okay, I'll come to you, Joy. The discourse too will push it back to you. There's this dichotomy between the GENCOS and the discourse. What we are pushing out, they are not taking it. Explain the dynamics behind that.
Thank you so much for that question. Like I said in my first response, on the 1st of November 2013, the GENCOS and the discourse signed a performance agreement. And this performance agreement had KPIs. For the generating companies, they were told to ramp up capacity. You know, during the NEPA and PACN days, most of the capacity of the various stations and machines went down due to lack of maintenance, investment, and all whatnot. So they were given a mandate from 2013 to 2018 October, being the 5th anniversary. You are expected to ramp up capacity to 5,000 megawatts. I don't need to tell Nigerians how much megawatts we have already available. As at last week, available capacity rose even up to over 8,000 megawatts. Now, if you look at the energy utilization within that period, between 2013 and 2019, even up to 2020, we have not exceeded the 3,500 mark. It's as if there is a cap that we should not take more than 3,500. So I am not here to apportion blame whether TCN is responsible or whether DISCO is responsible, because there are agencies responsible for monitoring and evaluating performance. So if over 6 years we are still on the same mark, then Nigerians need to hold such agencies and stakeholders to account. For the generating companies, we have over 4,000 megawatts stranded that nobody can utilize. And it is not being paid for. I must put it on record.
Let's talk about this Siemens deal that is supposed to take place with them as well as the federal government now to ramp up the megawatts to about 25,000 kilowatts. Can you talk us through it? I mean, we signed the deal, but then there seems to be some quietness on the side of the federal government. What's going on that end? And also, how can the infrastructure be increased when it comes to these transmission companies?
On the issue of the Siemens engagement with federal government, as you rightly said, is an engagement, is a diplomatic agreement between the Germany, the government of Germany, as well as of Germany, as well as of Nigeria. So if you ask me what is going on, is only what is in the public space that I can read. I was able to read the agreement. It's a 111-page document. I read through it. It looked at some challenges at the distribution level as well as the transmission level. And Siemens is proposing to bring in some infrastructure to leverage the stranded capacity so as Nigerians can access those capacity. There are a number of gray areas, and the generating companies we have requested to have a meeting with the Siemens Nigeria, so that we can have better visibility and clarity as to how it impacts GENCOS. This is because the agreement has some milestones or KPIs. In 2021, the agreement says that Siemens will move us to 7,000 megawatts. We are asking the question, this 7,000 megawatts, is it delivered capacity or is it installed? Are you referring to available capacity? Because if it is installed, currently we have 13,427 megawatts. If you're talking about available, we have about 8,000 megawatts available.
So
if you're talking about...
But we'll have to go on a quick break. We'll be right back to talk some more. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. We're still talking matters arising in Nigeria's power sector with Joy Ogaji, who's in our Abuja studios. She is the Secretary Association of Electricity Generation Companies of Nigeria, popularly called the GENCOS. Thank you so much, Joy, for staying with us. I don't know if you want to land on that point you were making before the break, before I then ask you my next question.
Okay. Yes, as I was saying before the break, I said the 2021 projection in the Siemens report that says we will get 7,000 to us is not clear. Like I said, we have in the value chain, we have what we call the installed capacity, we have available capacity, and then we have the delivered or utilized capacity. So we wanted some clarity, and I have requested a meeting with Siemens, the management of Siemens Nigeria. I think this month, hopefully, we may have a meeting to give us some clarity. Then there is a plan for 2023 that they will ramp up capacity to 11,000 megawatts, and then 2025 to 25,000 megawatts. Now, for us, we needed some clarity as to know exactly what these figures represent. If we currently have 13,000 megawatts installed, it is our belief that government will put together a plan, a benchmarkable plan that can optimally utilize what is being installed, both installed and available, before we look at incremental power or increasing more power. If you increase more power and what is already on ground is stranded, it doesn't really make commercial sense or economic sense. So this is why we want to meet with Siemens so that we can have a synergized and harmonized plans to enable Nigerians get the best value for money.
Okay. I wonder how soon that will be, but I have two questions for you. First, on the issue of intervention funds. I know one of the complaints by the GENCO has always been you're not paid enough, you're being owed, and you need to pay the gas supplies as well. There was a 701 billion naira, which you took the federal government to court. There's another 600 million thereabout. There's so many figures to go around, but what is the state of these intervention funds? Are you getting them now? And secondly, let me talk about synergy, or the lack of it thereof, between government agencies and providers such as you, the GENCOS. How would you describe the level of synergy? There's a lot of bickering between GENCOS, DISCOs, NBET, and regulators, NERC. How does all of that affect providing power for Nigerians?
Thank you so much. You've asked so many questions. I was feeling like repeating my PhD again because the questions were so many. But anyway, I'll try to pick them one after the other. I understand Nigerians are frustrated and they have so many questions, but I'll try to answer them one after the other. You started with the question of interventions and the status of it. That word, intervention, to GENCOS is misused. To the GENCOS, it is not an intervention. Rather, it is payment for debt, accrued debt that has accrued over the years. Government released the 701 billion to pay part of the debt. When I say part of the debt, a typical GENCO invoice comprise capacity and energy payment. So the 701 billion was released to pay the gas bills as well as pay part of the GENCO's energy bill. The energy bill, government was paying 80% of the energy bill. The capacity has not been paid. As I speak to you today, on the books of GENCOS, there is an accrued capacity payment of over 1.3 trillion that we have captured as capacity payment that has not been paid. So the 701 was used to pay the energy part of the 80% of the energy invoice for 2017 to 2018 December. And the remainder was used to pay gas bills. In a typical thermal GENCO invoice, 65 to 70% of the invoice constitutes gas cost. So 70 to 65% of that 701 billion went to the gas suppliers in Nigeria. So to us, it's not an intervention fund. We repeat, it's not an intervention fund. It's payment for part of my debt. By virtue of the privatization, NBET, an agency of federal government, entered into a PPA, that is power purchase agreement, with the generating companies to generate power, and NBET in turn will sell the power to discos, collect the money, and pay us 100%. That has not happened since the privatization. So these are monies that are being owed. You don't ask me whether the monies are owed by discos or not, because I mentioned, going by the principle of privity of contract for lawyers that will understand, I don't know what happens at the disco end because I have a contract with NBET. NBET is the middleman that buys power from me. So it's NBET that is owing me. And if it is NBET, it's federal government. So federal government paid part of their debt. It's not intervention. Now, going to lack of synergy in the power sector, you're very correct. And we also are very worried. All the operators are worried. Prior to this time, the power sector normally have what we call a stakeholder meeting, where we all meet the operators, all the operators, disco, GENCO, transmission, everybody sit down, and before any policy is brought to bear, where it is presented, the operators are given some time to respond to that policy statement. This period, what we have seen is discussions are made behind closed doors, and we just see it. In fact, the first time the operators see those policy statements and when it is presented to the media. So we are not aware of how those policies were arrived at, how those regulations were made.
Okay, Dr. Joy Ogaji, we'll come back to you very soon. We'll just take a quick break. Dr. Joy Ogaji, you're making a very salient and very important case as regards the fact that even this discourse, and the GENCOs and the people in the power sector don't sit down and have conversations any longer. I mean, you want to continue in that line also, and then you can also add to answering this, how has NBET not paying your money affect you increasing on your infrastructure in that field? So start from that, then we'll continue with NBET not paying your money. Has it affected your own infrastructure ramping up?
Thank you so much again, and for the opportunity. Yes, as I was saying before the short break, currently there is a lot of bickering, and lack of synergy here and there. I was jokingly telling someone, I said when we were in primary and secondary school, if you find a class that is very rowdy, investigate. It's either the monitor has stepped out or the monitor is not strong enough to control the class. And that is exactly what is happening in the power sector. We don't really know who is in charge at the moment. The different agencies have become regulators. Some people say we have 5 regulators. The Extra Act allows only 1 regulator, but currently we have about 5 or 6 regulators. And the reason being that any vacuum has to be filled. And if the vacuum, if a space is left open, somebody has to close out what lawyers will call a lacune. When a lacune occurs, it has to be covered one way or the other. It may be legally or illegally. So this is part of the problem we have. I think looking at Section 96 of the Extra, Section 96 sub 1, the Act, paraphrasing, says NEC is given the power to do all and everything to make sure that the power sector works. So I think it's possible that NEC is yet to utilize that power to make the operators perform optimally, or maybe they are doing their best, and their best is not helping anyone in the market. Either way, I don't know, but then that is exactly what's happening. Coming to the question on how lack of embeds payment is affecting our business, this is not just becoming an alarmist. We are heading towards the PACN days, notwithstanding that we are in a privatized market. And I will explain it as I go along. Now, as a generating plant, we are expected to have between minimum 30% of our revenue requirement to be able to operate optimally. I mentioned earlier on that in a typical thermal invoice, thermal means the power plant that use gas to generate power, and the hydros are the ones that use water. So when I say thermal, I mean the gas users.
Thank you so much, Joy Ogaji. It was a pleasure having you here on the morning show, and we'll continue this conversation some other time.